Curva stared at the blue planet rotating slowly on her screen. Earth, they called it. The third world from a yellow star in what humans named the Sol System. She had been watching this planet for 20 years now, filing the same boring reports. Every few months, nothing ever changed on these primitive worlds. The humans were still fighting each other over pieces of land. They still burned fossil fuels to power their machines. Their fastest ships barely reached their own moon, and even that took them several days. Curva yawned as she updated their classification in the Galactic Council database. World Class 7 Delta, minimal threat. It's not worth worrying about for at least 500 years. Her supervisor, a tall blue creature named Dex, floated over to her workstation. His three eyes looked at the report on her screen, still watching the angry primates. He asked with a laugh, "I heard they just had another war, something about oil again." Corva nodded. They never learn. Same patterns as always. They discover fire, they make weapons, they fight, they make peace, then they fight again. Their technology moves so slowly. Look at this. She pointed to a chart showing human progress over the last century. They only learned to fly 100 years ago. They still use chemical rockets to leave their atmosphere. At this rate, they won't even reach their nearest star for another 1,000 years. Dex looked at the numbers and shook his head. At least they keep themselves busy fighting each other instead of bothering the rest of the galaxy. The Council likes it when primitive species stay on their own worlds. The Galactic Council had been watching over the galaxy for 50,000 years. They knew how species developed. First came the discovery of fire and tools, then agriculture, and cities. After that, Industrial Revolution and basic space travel. The final step was always the same: global unification under a single government, followed by careful, planned expansion to nearby stars. Every successful species followed this pattern, the ones that didn't usually destroy themselves in wars before they could leave their homeworlds. The Council had seen it happen hundreds of times. Humans seemed to be stuck in the fighting stage. They had the technology to destroy their whole planet several times over, but they couldn't agree on anything. They spoke different languages, followed different religions, and lived under dozens of different governments. Their own planet wasn't even unified, so how could they possibly become a threat to anyone else? Corva finished her report and sent it to the Threat Assessment Board. She knew they would barely read it before stamping it with their usual conclusion. Continue passive monitoring. No action required. 3 levels above Corva's office, the board met in their crystal chamber. 5 alien species sat around a circular table, reviewing reports from across the galaxy. Board Chairman Ross, an ancient creature that looked like a walking tree, read Corva's summary aloud. "Earth shows continued political fragmentation," he said, in his slow, deep voice. "Military technology remains primitive. Space capability limited. To their own solar system, population growth slowing. No signs of global unification. Recommendation: maintain current observation level." Board member Kix, a creature covered in purple scales, nodded in agreement. Same as always with these young species. They think their little wars are so important. They have no idea there's a whole galaxy out here. The other board members laughed. They'd all been through this stage in their own species development thousands of years ago. The humans would eventually grow out of their fighting phase, probably. In another few centuries, then they would unify their planet, develop proper space travel, maybe qualify for junior membership in the Council sometime in the distant future. Mark them for review in 50 years, Chairman Ross decided. Unless something dramatic happens, we don't need to think about Earth again until then. What the Council didn't understand about humans was that their chaos was actually their greatest strength. While other species needed strong central governments to organize their research and development, humans worked differently. A scientist in one country would discover something new and immediately share it. The whole world, through their global communication networks. Dr. Lisa Park sat in her small laboratory in Seoul, South Korea, staring at equations that covered 3 whiteboards. She had been working on quantum computing problems for 5 years, ever since she finished her doctorate. The work was difficult and often frustrating, but she loved solving puzzles that seemed impossible. Most people didn't understand what quantum computing meant. Lisa barely understood it herself sometimes, but she knew it was important. Regular computers use bits of information that were either on or off, like light switches. Quantum computers used quantum bits that could be on and off at the same time, which meant they could solve certain problems. Millions of times faster than regular computers. The problem was making quantum computers work reliably. The quantum bits were extremely fragile. Any tiny disturbance could destroy the calculations. Lisa had been trying to find a way to protect the quantum information while still allowing it to process data. At 2 in the morning, after 18 hours of continuous work, Lisa finally saw the solution. It was so simple she almost laughed. Instead of trying to protect individual quantum bits, she could create networks of them that corrected each other's errors automatically. If one bit got disturbed, the others would fix it without stopping. The calculation. She quickly wrote down the mathematics and ran a computer simulation. It worked perfectly. Not only did it work, but it was far more efficient than anything anyone had ever designed before. Lisa's method could make quantum computers 1,000,000 times more powerful than current technology. Lisa was tired. She spent the next 6 hours writing a detailed paper explaining her discovery. Then she did what human scientists always did. She uploaded it to the global research network where any scientist in the world could read it for free. Within hours, researchers on every continent were downloading Lisa's paper. By the end of the week, teams in 12 countries were building prototypes based on her design. By the end of the month, the first working quantum computers using Lisa's method were running calculations that would have taken traditional computers centuries to complete. The Galactic Council's monitoring systems were programmed to watch for obvious signs of advancement, like new rockets or nuclear tests. They completely missed the quantum revolution spreading through Earth's research communities. Their computers flagged the same old human conflicts and political arguments, but ignored the scientific papers being shared freely across the globe. Lisa Park had just made the Council's 500-year prediction completely wrong. But none of their watchers noticed. They were still looking at humans as primitive creatures fighting over resources. It's not as a species on the verge of a technological explosion that would change everything. 18 months had passed since Lisa Park published her quantum computing breakthrough. The Galactic Council's monitoring stations continued their lazy watch over Earth, their automated systems dutifully recording the same patterns they had observed for decades. Humans were still arguing about borders, still burning fossil fuels, still launching primitive chemical rockets that barely escaped their atmosphere. Corva filed her regular report without much thought. Political tensions between major powers remained high. Economic inequality persisted. Environmental problems continued to worsen. The humans showed no signs of the global cooperation that marked a species ready for galactic contact. If anything, they seemed more divided than ever. What Corva's instruments couldn't detect was the invisible revolution spreading through humanity's information networks. Lisa Park's quantum computing method had become the foundation for discoveries that were reshaping human civilization from the inside out in Lagos. Nigeria, 16-year-old David Oak read Lisa's paper on his school tablet. David was good at mathematics, but he wasn't planning to become a scientist. He wanted to solve his neighborhood's power problems. The local electrical grid failed almost every day, leaving families without lights or refrigeration. David wondered if quantum computing could help design better batteries, using Lisa's principles. David created a new type of energy storage system that could hold 10 times more power than traditional batteries while charging in minutes instead of hours. He built a prototype in his family's garage using parts ordered online. When he tested it, the results were so good he thought he had made a mistake. David posted his design on the same research network where Lisa had shared her discovery. Within days, engineers around the world were building improved versions of David's battery. Within weeks, the design had evolved into something that could power entire city blocks using nothing but solar panels and wind turbines. Meanwhile, in Vancouver, Canada, retired engineer Bob Martinez was reading everything he could find about quantum computing. Bob had worked on communication systems for 40 years before retiring. He understood how information traveled through networks, and he realized that Lisa's quantum error correction method might solve a problem that had puzzled physicists for decades. The problem was faster-than-light communication. Einstein's theories said that nothing could travel faster than light, but quantum mechanics suggested that information could be shared instantly between connected particles, no matter how far apart they were. Scientists called this quantum entanglement, and they had been trying to use it for communication for years without success. Bob saw something others had missed. Lisa's error correction method didn't just protect quantum information from interference, it could amplify and direct it. Bob spent 3 months working out the mathematics, then built his first prototype in his basement workshop. The device looked like a metal box full of crystals and wires. But when Bob tested it with his friend, Helen across the city, they could send messages instantly, with no delay at all. Not just fast messages, truly instant. Communication that ignored the speed of light completely. Bob shared his discovery the same way Lisa and David had shared theirs. The global research community exploded with excitement, made teams around the world, began building faster-than-light communication networks. Within 6 months, scientists on Earth could talk to their colleagues on Mars with no delay, even though radio signals normally took 20 minutes to cross that distance. In Mumbai, India, a collective of programmers led by Priya Singh was working on something even more revolutionary. They had combined Lisa's quantum computing breakthrough with David's energy storage systems and Bob's instant communication method. The result was something that shouldn't have been possible, a computer that used biological processes to enhance quantum calculations. Traditional computers use silicon chips to process information. Quantum computers use special crystals and magnetic fields. Priya's team discovered that living cells could host quantum processes more efficiently than any artificial system. They grew computer processors using modified bacteria, creating biological quantum computers that were smaller, faster, more powerful than anything built from metal and silicon. The breakthrough that changed everything came when Dr. Maya Singh, Priya's sister, used these biological quantum computers to solve equations that described the structure of space and time itself. Maya was working on theoretical physics problems that most people thought were impossible to solve. But the biological quantum computers could handle calculations so complex that they revealed new mathematical relationships. Hidden in Einstein's old theories, Maya discovered that space and time weren't solid things like walls or floors. They were more like water, fluid substances that could be pushed and pulled and folded. The mathematics showed exactly how to manipulate space-time using controlled quantum fields. It was the theoretical foundation for faster-than-light travel. Maya's discovery should have taken humanity hundreds of years to achieve. It required quantum computers that shouldn't have existed, energy systems that defied conventional physics, and communication networks that ignored the speed of light. But because Lisa Park had shared her work freely, because David Oak and Bob Martinez and Priya Singh had all built on each other's discoveries, humanity had leaped forward in just 18 months. The first practical application came from an unexpected source. Captain Tom Bradley was a cargo pilot who flew supplies between Earth and the Moon. He had been following the scientific discoveries with interest because anything that made space travel easier would help his business. When Maya Singh published her space-time manipulation equations, Tom saw them as an engineering problem rather than a theoretical puzzle. Working with a small team of engineers and scientists, Tom designed humanity's first faster-than-light spacecraft. They called it the Pioneer, and it looked nothing like the massive ships that science fiction writers had imagined. It was small and simple, about the size of a private jet. Powered by David's advanced batteries and controlled by Priya's biological quantum computers, the Pioneer's first test flight took it from Earth to Proxima Centauri, humanity's nearest neighboring star system, in just 6 days. The journey should have taken over 4 years at the speed of light. Tom's ship had covered the distance 40 times, faster than light itself. Tom didn't announce his achievement to the world with parades and speeches. He simply filed a flight report and began planning humanity's first interstellar colony. Within months, other pilots were building their own faster-than-light ships using Tom's open-source designs. Humanity began expanding into the galaxy quietly, without fanfare. It's the same way they had always explored new frontiers. The Galactic Council's monitoring station at the edge of the Sol system was designed to detect primitive chemical rockets and nuclear-powered spacecraft. It completely missed the Pioneer's departure because Tom's ship used quantum field manipulation to slip between normal space and what humans were calling hyperspace. The monitoring station's sensors couldn't detect something that technically wasn't there. Corva continued filing her reports, unaware that the species she was watching had just achieved in 2 years what the most advanced galactic civilizations had taken millennia to accomplish. The humans were still fighting their small wars and arguing about their politics. But they had also quietly become the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. Commander Rex was having a boring day patrolling the outer edges of Council space when his sensors detected something unusual near Wolf 359. The star system was empty except for a few rocky planets that nobody cared about. It was exactly the kind of place where primitive species sometimes showed up with their first clumsy attempts at interstellar travel. Rex belonged to a species called the Hegemony, tall gray creatures with large heads and gentle personalities. His people had discovered faster-than-light travel 3,000 years ago. After spending millennia unifying their home planet under a single peaceful government, the Hegemony were proud of their patient, methodical approach to development. They never rushed into anything, never took unnecessary risks, never acted without careful planning. When Rex's ship detected the unknown vessel, he assumed it was probably some young species making their first brave journey to a nearby star. These encounters happened occasionally, and they were always touching in their own way. The primitive aliens would be amazed to meet representatives of galactic civilization. Rex would offer them guidance and protection, help them understand their place in the greater universe, and eventually escort them to the Council for proper integration into galactic society. Rex activated his ship's communication systems and approached the unknown vessel carefully. He didn't want to frighten the primitive crew with sudden movements or aggressive displays. First contact was a delicate procedure that required patience and wisdom. The ship Rex found was not what he expected. It was small but elegant, with smooth curves and no visible engines or weapons. It looked more like a work of art than a spacecraft. Rex had seen thousands of different ship designs over his long career, but this one was completely unfamiliar. Unknown vessel. This is Commander Rex of the Galactic Council patrol ship Harmony. He broadcast on standard frequencies. Please identify yourself and state your purpose in this system. The response came immediately in perfect galactic standard language. Commander Rex, this is Captain Tom Bradley of the Earth vessel Genesis. We're conducting a survey of this system for possible colonization. Nice to meet you. Rex was surprised by several things. First, the unknown species already knew galactic standard language, which suggested they had been in contact with spacefaring civilizations before. Second, they were talking about colonization, which meant they had the technology and resources for large-scale space settlements. Third, the captain's casual tone suggested they weren't intimidated by meeting representatives of galactic authority. Captain Bradley, Rex replied carefully. I don't have any records of your species in our databases. Where are you from? Earth, Tom answered. It's in the Sol system, about 8 light-years from here. We're relatively new to interstellar travel, but we're learning fast. 8 light-years. Rex quickly calculated the distance and felt confused, according to his star charts. The Sol system contained a primitive world designated as Classivan Delta. The inhabitants were supposed to be barely capable of reaching their own moon, let alone traveling between stars. There had to be some mistake. Captain Bradley, I need to verify some information. How long did your journey from Earth take? About 6 days, Tom replied. We would have been here sooner, but we stopped to check out a few other systems along the way. 6 days to travel, 8 light-years, meant this ship was moving at more than 400 times the speed of light. That was impossible. Even the Council's most advanced ships could only manage about 50 times light speed, and they were the result of thousands of years of careful technological development. Rex activated his scanner and pointed it at the human ship. The results made no sense. The Genesis showed no emissions from fusion engines, antimatter drives, or any other propulsion system Rex recognized, according to his instruments. The ship was somehow manipulating space-time itself to achieve faster-than-light travel. Such technology was purely theoretical, even for the Council's best scientists. Captain Bradley, Rex said slowly, I think there may be some confusion. Our records show that Earth is inhabited by a primitive species that has not yet achieved interstellar capability. Are you certain you're from the Sol system? Tom's voice carried a hint of amusement. I'm pretty sure I know where I'm from, Commander. Earth, third planet from the Sun, home to about 8 billion humans. We only started traveling between stars about 2 years ago, but we've already established colonies in 12 systems. 12 systems. In 2 years? Rex felt a cold sensation in his stomach. This was completely outside normal development patterns. Species didn't leap from primitive spaceflight to advanced interstellar colonization in just 2 years. It took centuries. Or millennia to develop the technology, resources, and social organization needed for such expansion. Captain Bradley, I need to ask you to accompany me to the nearest council station for debriefing. The information you've provided requires immediate verification and assessment. I appreciate the offer, Commander, but we need to finish our survey here first. We're looking for planets that might support human life, and this system has some interesting possibilities. Maybe we can meet up later when we're both less busy. Rex couldn't believe what he was hearing. The human captain was politely declining a direct order from a council patrol commander. In 50 years of service, Rex had never encountered a species that refused galactic authority so casually. Captain Bradley, I don't think you understand. Galactic Council oversees all interstellar activities in this region. New species must be properly evaluated and integrated before they can establish colonies. It's for everyone's safety and benefit. That sounds like a reasonable system, Commander, and I'm sure it works well for species that need that kind of oversight. But humans prefer to do things independently for now. We're not looking for trouble with anyone, but we're also not looking for supervision. If you want to open diplomatic relations, we'd be happy to talk, but we're going to continue our expansion either way. Rex realized he was dealing with something unprecedented. This wasn't a primitive species making their first tentative steps into space. These humans had technology that surpassed the Council's own capabilities, and they showed no interest in fitting into the established galactic order. Rex transmitted an emergency report to Council headquarters while continuing his conversation with Captain Bradley. The response came back within minutes. All patrol commanders were ordered to gather as much information as possible about human capabilities and intentions, but not to take any aggressive action until the situation was better understood. Captain Bradley, can you tell me more about human expansion? How many colonies have you established, and how quickly are you adding new ones? We've got permanent settlements on 14 worlds now, not counting the research stations. New colonies are starting up every few months as more people decide they want to try living on other planets. It's not centrally planned or anything. Different groups just organize their own expeditions and go where they want to go. This was getting worse by the minute. Not only were humans expanding rapidly, but their expansion was completely uncoordinated. There was no central authority controlling their activities, no way to negotiate limits or agreements. They were spreading through the galaxy like some kind of biological infection. Captain Bradley, who speaks for humanity in diplomatic matters, who has the authority to make agreements on behalf of your species? Tom laughed. That's a complicated question, Commander. You don't really have a single government or leader. Different human nations and organizations handle their own foreign relations. If you want to establish formal diplomatic contact, you'd probably need to talk to several different groups. Rex felt his career crashing down around him. In his report to Council headquarters, he would have to explain that he had discovered a species with superior technology, uncontrolled expansion, and no unified government to negotiate with. It was exactly the kind of situation that the Council's careful policies were designed to prevent. The conversation continued for another hour, with Rex asking increasingly desperate questions, and Tom providing increasingly disturbing answers. Humans had developed their advanced technology in less than 3 years. They shared their scientific discoveries freely instead of keeping them secret. They established colonies without asking permission from existing galactic authorities. They had no central military command, no unified economic system, and no single spokesperson who could make binding agreements. From the Council's perspective, humanity represented absolute chaos, a species that had somehow achieved advanced technology without the social development that was supposed to accompany it. They were everything the galactic order was designed to control and contain. When the conversation finally ended, Rex sat alone in his command chair, staring at the human ship on his screen. The Genesis was already moving toward one of the system's planets, apparently continuing its survey mission, as if meeting a Council patrol ship was just a minor interruption in their day. Rex's emergency report triggered alarm bells throughout the Council's administrative hierarchy. For the first time in thousands of years, they faced a situation their careful policies couldn't handle. The emergency session convened on Titan Prime, the Galactic Council's administrative capital, within 48 hours of Commander Rex's report. The massive crystal dome that housed the council chambers hadn't seen this level of activity in over a century. Representatives from all 12 founding species arrived on their fastest ships, their faces showing the kind of concern usually reserved for galactic wars or natural disasters. Supreme Chancellor Voss stood at the center of the chamber, his ancient, tree-like form swaying slightly as he addressed the assembled delegates. At over 3,000 years old, Voss had guided the council through countless crises, but nothing quite like this. His deep, resonant voice filled the chamber as he read Commander Rex's report aloud. The species identifying themselves as humans have achieved faster-than-light travel. Capabilities that exceed our own by a factor of 8, Voss announced. They have established colonies in at least 14 star systems within 2 years of achieving interstellar flight. Most concerning, they show no centralized government structure and no respect for established territorial boundaries. Delegate Kix, representing the purple-scaled Zephyrians, stood up abruptly. This is impossible, Chancellor. No species develops that quickly. Our own xenobiologists have studied thousands of worlds. Technological advancement follows predictable patterns. There must be some mistake in the report. Commander Rex's credentials are impeccable, Voss replied. He has conducted first contact procedures with 47 species over his career. His report has been verified by 3 independent sources. The humans are real, and they represent a fundamental challenge to everything we understand about species development. Professor Kale, the Council's chief xenobiologist, activated a holographic display showing human expansion patterns. The elderly scientist for arms moved gracefully as he pointed to various star systems. I've been analyzing the data for the past day, and the situation is worse than we initially understood. The humans aren't just technologically advanced. They're biologically adaptable in ways we've never seen. The display showed human colonies thriving in environments that should have been impossible for their species. Desert worlds with no water, ice planets with temperatures that should freeze, carbon-based life, gas giants with crushing atmospheric pressure. Somehow, humans were not only surviving in these conditions, but actually prospering. How are they doing this? Asked Delegate Moore, a crystalline being whose species had taken 4,000 years to colonize even 3 star systems. Are they using environmental suits? Terraforming technology? Professor Kale shook his head. That's what makes this so disturbing. They're not terraforming the planets to suit their biology. They're adapting their biology to suit the planets. Each colony shows genetic modifications that allow humans to thrive in local conditions. They're changing themselves instead of changing their environment. A shocked murmur ran through the chamber. Genetic modification was not unknown in the galaxy, but it was usually limited to correcting diseases or minor improvements. The idea of deliberately altering an entire species to adapt to different worlds was almost unthinkable. There's more, Professor Kale continued. 3 of our member species have small populations that have chosen to join human colonies instead of remaining with their own people, the Altarians, the Centauri, and the vegan nomads. They report that human societies are more dynamic and offer better opportunities for personal growth. Chancellor Voss felt his ancient bark-like skin tightening with stress. Member species abandoning? their own civilizations to join a primitive newcomer was unprecedented. It suggested that human society offered something the established galactic order couldn't provide. Admiral Zev, the Council's military commander, stood to address the assembly. His species, the hegemony, had been the galaxy's peacekeepers for 2 millennia. I've completed a tactical analysis of the human expansion. From a military perspective, they present a unique challenge. They have no centralized command structure, no unified military, and no single homeworld that could be threatened or defended. The Admiral activated his own display, showing the scattered pattern of human colonies. Traditional military doctrine relies on identifying and neutralizing command centers, supply lines, and strategic resources. Humans have none of these vulnerabilities. Each colony is independent, self-sufficient, and capable of rapid technological innovation. Defeating them would require simultaneously attacking dozens of worlds. And even then, survivors could establish new colonies faster than we could eliminate existing ones. Delegate Kix slammed his scaled fist on his desk. Then we must act quickly. Before they spread further, impose a quarantine on all human-occupied systems. Cut off their supply lines and force them to negotiate. With respect, Delegate Kix, that approach has already failed, Admiral Zev replied. We attempted to implement economic sanctions and travel restrictions 3 weeks ago. The humans simply ignored them. They don't depend on our trade networks or transportation systems. They've developed their own faster-than-light communication networks and manufacturing capabilities that make our resources obsolete. Professor Kale brought up another display showing technological innovations spreading through the galaxy's black markets. Human inventions are being copied and distributed by independent traders and smugglers. Their quantum computing methods, advanced energy storage systems, and biological manufacturing techniques are already being used by dozens of species. We can't contain their technology because they share it freely. The economic implications were staggering. The Galactic Council's authority rested largely on their control of advanced technology and trade networks. If any species could access human innovations through black market channels, the careful balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for 50,000 years would collapse. Chancellor Voss raised one of his massive branch-like arms for silence. The question before us is not whether we can stop human expansion. Based on the evidence presented that appears to be impossible, the question is how we adapt to a galaxy where our traditional authority structures no longer apply. You're suggesting we negotiate with them? Delegate Moore asked, his crystalline body flickering with agitation. They've shown no respect for galactic law, expand wherever they want, ignore our territorial boundaries, and corrupt our member species with their chaotic social systems. The alternative is a war we cannot win, Admiral Zev said quietly. And even if we could win, the cost would be the destruction of galactic civilization itself. The humans aren't our enemies. They're simply operating by different rules than we understand. The debate continued for hours, the delegates arguing for various approaches ranging from diplomatic engagement to military action. But as the discussion progressed, it became clear that the Council faced a fundamental choice between adapting to a new galactic reality or watching their carefully constructed civilization crumble. The final decision came from an unexpected source. A message arrived from the human colony at Proxima Centauri addressed directly to the Galactic Council. It was from Dr. Lisa Park, a scientist whose quantum computing breakthrough had started humanity's technological revolution. To the members of the Galactic Council, the message began. We understand that our rapid expansion has caused concern among the established galactic powers. We would like to propose a meeting to discuss how humans and the existing galactic community can coexist peacefully. We have no desire to disrupt the stability that has maintained galactic peace for so long. We simply ask for the right to explore and settle new worlds according to our own methods and values. The message concluded with an invitation to send diplomatic representatives to a neutral system where formal negotiations could begin. It was exactly the kind of reasonable diplomatic approach that the Council had been hoping for. But it also represented a fundamental shift in the balance of galactic power. For the first time in their history, The Galactic Council was being offered a partnership by a species they couldn't control or contain. The age of unchallenged galactic authority was ending, and a new era of cooperation and competition was about to begin. 5 years had passed since Commander Rex first encountered Captain Tom Bradley near Wolf 359. The galaxy looked very different now. Trade routes that had remained unchanged for millennia suddenly buzzed with new activity. Technologies that the Council's scientists had declared impossible were being used by species throughout known space. The careful, predictable order that had governed galactic civilization for 50,000 years was transforming into something unprecedented. Dr. Lisa Park stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic station orbiting Kepler 442, watching ships from dozens of different species arrive for the historic Council assembly. She had never intended to become humanity's representative to the galaxy. She was a scientist, not a diplomat. But somehow, it's the woman whose quantum computing breakthrough had started. Humanity's rapid expansion had become the person everyone looked to when difficult decisions needed to be made. The emergency session that would determine the galaxy's future was scheduled to begin in 2 hours. Lisa knew that many Council species were still hoping to find some way to contain or control human expansion. They couldn't understand that humanity's strength came from the very qualities that other species saw as weaknesses. Chancellor Voss arrived early at the diplomatic station, his ancient form moving slowly through the corridors designed to accommodate dozens of different body types. He had requested a private meeting with Dr. Park before the formal session began. The Chancellor had lived for over 3 millennia, guiding the Council through countless crises. But he had never faced anything like the human challenge. Lisa met the Chancellor in a simple conference room with large windows showing the planet below. Kepler 442b was one of the first worlds that humans and aliens had settled together, a living example of what cooperation between species could accomplish. Dr. Park, Chancellor Voss said in his deep, resonant voice, "I must confess that your species continues to confound our understanding. We have studied thousands of civilizations over the millennia, but humans follow no predictable patterns." Lisa smiled. "I think that's exactly the point, Chancellor. We don't follow patterns because we don't want to be predictable, or chaos is what makes us creative." "But chaos leads to conflict," the Chancellor replied. "Every species in the Council learned this lesson. Unity brings peace. Order brings stability. Your humans seem to thrive on the very disorganization that destroys other civilizations." "Maybe that's because we've learned to turn conflict into cooperation," Lisa said. "When human groups disagree, we don't try to eliminate the disagreement. We use it to explore different solutions to the same problems. Our diversity makes us stronger, not weaker." The Chancellor's ancient eyes studied Lisa carefully. "Your expansion has fundamentally disrupted the galactic balance of power. 3 of our member species have populations that have chosen to join human colonies rather than remain with their own people. Our economic systems are being undermined by technologies that you share freely instead of controlling. How do you expect us to maintain galactic stability under these conditions?" Lisa gestured toward the planet visible through the conference room windows. "Look at Kepler 442b, Chancellor. Humans, Altarians, Centauri, and vegans, all living and working together. No single species in charge, no rigid hierarchy, just voluntary cooperation between different groups with different strengths. The planet is more prosperous and innovative than any single species colony we've ever established. But who governs such a settlement? Who makes the final decisions when groups disagree?" "Everyone governs," Lisa replied. "Decisions are made by consensus when possible, and by majority vote when consensus can't be reached. It's messy, and sometimes slow, but it works because everyone has a voice." The Chancellor was quiet for a long moment, processing this concept. The idea of governing by consensus rather than hierarchy was almost incomprehensible to someone who had spent 3,000 years in a system based on centralized authority. "Dr. Park, the Council faces a choice that will determine the future of galactic civilization. We can attempt to maintain the old order through military force, though our own analysts believe such an approach would fail and likely destroy galactic peace in the process. Or we can adapt to a new reality where the Council serves as coordinators rather than rulers. I need to understand what humanity wants from us. Lisa had been preparing for this question for months. We don't want to destroy the Council or replace the system that has maintained galactic peace for so long. We just want the freedom to explore and grow in our own way. The galaxy is big enough for different approaches to coexist. And if we agree to this partnership, what guarantees do we have that human expansion won't eventually overwhelm the existing galactic order? The same guarantee you have with any species. Chancellor, none. But consider this: in 5 years, humans have established colonies in over 50 systems. We could have easily taken control of established trade routes or conquered existing settlements. Instead, we focused on empty systems and cooperative ventures. We're not interested in conquest. We're interested in growth and discovery. The formal council assembly convened 3 hours later in the station's main chamber. Representatives from 43 species filled the curved amphitheater, creating a rainbow of different body types, skin colors, and communication methods. The tension in the chamber was thick enough to cut with a knife. Chancellor Voss called the session to order and immediately presented the choice facing the council. We can maintain our traditional approach to galactic governance, which would require military action to contain human expansion. Or we can evolve our role from rulers to coordinators, acknowledging that the galaxy now contains multiple centers of power and influence. Admiral Zev presented his military assessment first. A war against humanity would require simultaneous attacks on over 50 star systems. Even if we achieved complete tactical success, which our simulations suggest is unlikely, the cost would be the destruction of the infrastructure that supports galactic civilization. We would win a galaxy of ruins. Professor Kale followed with his xenobiological analysis. Human society appears to be inherently adaptive and resilient. Their decentralized structure means that losing any number of colonies would not significantly impact their overall expansion capability. More importantly, their cooperative approach to other species has already begun to transform galactic culture in positive ways. The debate that followed was intense but civil. Species that had rarely agreed on anything found themselves having to reconsider fundamental assumptions about how civilizations should develop and interact. Some delegates argued for maintaining traditional authority structures. Others supported the new cooperative model that humans represented. The turning point came when Delegate Moore of the Crystalline Republic stood to address the assembly. His species had been among the most vocal critics of human expansion, arguing that their chaos threatened galactic stability. I have spent the past month visiting human colonies and joint settlements, Delegate Moore announced. What I found challenged everything I believed about civilization and progress. The human colony at Vega 3 has achieved energy independence, eliminated poverty, and developed new medical technologies that have extended the average lifespan of all resident species by 30%. They accomplished this in 3 years, working with refugees from the Altarian Civil War and nomads from the vegan systems. Gah! Delegate Moore's crystalline body flickered with changing colors as he continued. The traditional council approach would have taken decades to resettle the Altarian refugees and centuries to develop comparable medical advances. The humans did both simultaneously, and they did it by embracing the very diversity that we have always seen as a source of weakness. Final vote was closer than anyone expected, but the result was decisive. 26 species voted to transform the council from a governing body into a coordinating organization that would facilitate cooperation between different civilizations rather than controlling their development. Captain Tom Bradley, now Admiral L. Bradley, stood on the bridge of humanity's first joint exploration vessel, the Harmony. The ship was crewed by humans, Altarians, Centauri, and 3 other species working together to map unexplored regions of the galaxy. It was exactly the kind of impossible cooperation that the old council system had never been able to achieve. The ship's destination was a star system at the edge of known space, where long-range sensors had detected possible signs of another spacefaring civilization, if they were right. This would be humanity's first contact with a species that had developed independently of the council's influence. As the Harmony dropped out of hyperspace and began scanning the new system, Tom reflected on how much the galaxy had changed. The old system of careful, controlled development had given way to something messier, but more dynamic. Species that had stagnated for millennia were rediscovering growth and innovation. Technologies that had seemed impossible were becoming commonplace. Most importantly, the galaxy had learned that there was more than one way to build a civilization. The Council's method of unity through hierarchy worked for some species, but humanity had proven that diversity and controlled chaos could be just as effective. Professor Kale published his final report on the human phenomenon 6 months later. The document, titled The Human Paradox: How Chaos Creates Order, became required reading throughout the galaxy. In it, he concluded that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization was not their advanced technology or rapid expansion, but their demonstration that growth didn't have to end, that stagnation wasn't inevitable, and that cooperation could be stronger than control. The Galactic Council's greatest mistake had been underestimating a species that turned their apparent weaknesses into unprecedented strengths. Humanity's quiet awakening had forced the entire galaxy to wake up. 2 new possibilities, and the universe was richer for it.